We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA.
Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
Welcome back to Notify America. We have multiple pressing stories to get to, stories that include Maine's Secretary of State jumping on the election interference bandwagon. Also, Donald Trump receiving some good news finally in the state of Colorado yesterday. We also dig further into who's really behind this Colorado lawsuit, and we have some interesting revelations. Also, warmonger Senator Lindsey Graham goes completely off the deep end, looking for any chance at all to drag us into a new war, and he's found a target. We have the video, absolutely insane. Also, we look at some new polling that shows Lindsey Graham's pupil is rising in the polls. But before we get started, press the like button and subscribe. Share the video with a friend. All of that helps out with the YouTube algorithm. Late yesterday, in a controversial move, Maine's Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, a Democrat, decided to take it upon herself and remove former President Trump from her state's primary ballot, citing concerns about his eligibility, she says, under the 14th Amendment. The decision came a day after Trump's lawyers demanded Bellows recuse herself, pointing to her past statements about the J6 Capitol riot. Using a brand new non-judicial administrative procedure that she basically made up herself, Bellows decided to unilaterally block President Trump from the ballot in what she describes as a necessary move to safeguard democracy. Her filing says this: Mr. Trump engaged in insurrection against the United States such that he is not qualified to hold the office of president. But did he really engage in insurrection? Says who? Who says that? She says so. Shenna Bellows says so. It sounds more like it's her opinion than a fact. Trump's never been indicted for insurrection by a prosecutor, never convicted of insurrection, never even charged with insurrection in the court system. In fact, the Democrats tried to impeach him over J6, and he was acquitted for it. So when Shenna Bellows interferes in our election, telling her state's voters who they can and can't vote for, deciding for them, all based on her saying, her claiming that Trump's an insurrectionist, using her opinion of him, just pointing and saying, I don't like him, so I'll claim that he committed this crime and use it to do an end run around the American people. See what's happening here, right? This is all made up. It's her opinion, that's all. They're doing this based on their opinion of him. If he was convicted of insurrection, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Here's Vivek Ramaswamy commenting on what just happened. Watch.
Sometimes the truth hurts. That's when it's most important to see it. What they're doing to Donald Trump right now in Maine, you see the news today, it's unconstitutional, it's anti-American, it's wrong. I'm doing everything I can to stand against it. I'm the only candidate in this race who has said, I will remove my name from any ballot where they remove Trump as well. But we got to open our eyes to the fact that they're not going to let this man get anywhere near that finish line. That's the hard truth. We can't fall for their trap. They're selling us the rope today that they will use to hang us tomorrow. All I'm asking you to do is to open your eyes right now. See what's going on. They have fooled us time and again. Fool me once, shame on them. Fool me twice, shame on us. Open your eyes, people. If you see what I see, then you understand that next year isn't what they're selling you. It's going to be something else altogether. Get ready for it.
In another story, President Trump's name has been restored to the state of Colorado's primary ballot, at least for the moment, after the state Supreme Court ruled last week that he was disqualified from running. Well, the Colorado GOP filed an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Colorado Secretary of State, the person who's responsible for the state's elections, said yesterday, that with the appeal now filed, Trump will be included as a candidate unless the U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear the case. Now, when you dig into all of this, it takes you down this rabbit hole because it turns out that the group who's behind the lawsuit that made its way to the Colorado Supreme Court, the case that actually got Trump removed from the ballot, we reported on this last week actually and showed you that the organization behind all of this, an organization called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, that's the name of the group, based in Washington, a nonprofit government ethics and accountability watchdog group. Well, the current CEO of the group, the people responsible for this lawsuit, is a man named Noah Bookbinder, who also, it turns out, is on the Department of Homeland Security's Advisory Council. So there's this like direct link between him and the Biden administration. But it goes even further than that, because when you dig into who's funding this group, where they get their money from, who their donors are, well, ding, 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 guess who? George Soros, it turns out, is the largest donor to the organization. Watch Melanie Sloan, the founder of the group, who was also the executive director. Listen to this clip of her explaining where they get their money from. Watch.
Find a legal hook to push our issues hard.
Who are some of the biggest donors you have, and is there a restriction on how much money they can give you?
We don't have any restriction, but I would say our biggest donors are, for example, the Open Society Institute is a very big donor.
And whose organization is that?
Well, it's a foundation, but it's well known to be George Soros is the one who funds it. The Wallace Global Fund gives us money. The ARCA Foundation gives us money. Those are some of the big foundations where Carnegie Corporation gives us money.
You do see a thread through the different sides in this where a big donor like George Soros will give to an awful lot of progressive organizations. Does he ever ask for anything directly?
No, and I have met him, and he's never asked for anything at all. And I meet with the program officer from the Open Society Institute, and they're very happy with what we do, and they're very keen on transparency. We're part of their democracy.
In another story, Real Clear Investigations reports that viruses once thought to be eradicated from the U.S. populace have begun to make a comeback, suggesting that the recent rise in infectious diseases such as polio, leprosy, TB, malaria, could be linked to the sudden rise in illegal immigration through the southern border. Stanford University physician and scientist Jay Bhattacharya, he was interviewed for the report, and he said this: the recent polio and leprosy cases are almost certainly imports to the U.S. Real Clear Investigations writes this: recently, however, some of the forgotten but still formidable infectious diseases have begun to reappear in the U.S. For 2 years running. Polio has been detected in some New York water samples, and this fall, leprosy reemerged in Florida, where cases of malaria have also been recorded. One distinct possibility, which officials are loath to discuss, is that the millions of migrants who have crossed the country in recent years, many are from countries where such rare diseases persist and vaccination programs are not robust. Homeland Security acknowledged it does not have vaccination records for the millions who have entered the U.S. since January 2021. New York City's health commissioner, by the way, Ashwin Vasan, recently wrote an 11-page letter about this, pointing directly to the southern border, writing, more than 50,000 people have come to New York City in the past year shortly after crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, and he says, I am writing now to underscore how critical it is that healthcare providers take a wide range of considerations into account when working with people who are seeking asylum. Look, the migrant crisis at this point has gotten so bad that left-wing politicians are even sounding the alarm, which you know it's bad when that happens. Here's New York City's mayor saying that we've crossed the breaking point. Watch this.
We're seeing the erosion of the quality of life that we've improved on in such a short period of time of this administration. And we have been impacted. For many months, we were able to keep the visualization of this crisis from hitting our streets, but we have reached a breaking point. We're no longer able to do that because of the volume in numbers. Just last week, we had 3,900 people that arrived here. We are averaging anywhere from 2,500 to close to 4,000 a week. And if you do the math, you see that's 8,000 every 2 weeks, potentially 16,000 a month that we must feed, clothe, house, educate children, and all the services that you would give a normal adult. And we're seeing that play out on our streets of New York. And that is what the breaking point looks like, what we are experiencing right now.
In another story, warmonger Republican Senator Lindsey Graham calls for the all-out destruction of Iran, a country almost 90 million people strong. During a Fox News interview yesterday, he called for President Biden during the interview to hit Iran and blow them off the map. He says this. Watch.
And we want to talk about what Trey Yanks was just mentioning.
Yeah.
We are now at, 103 attacks on our troops in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah.
And then 21 international vessels have also been attacked by the Houthis in the Red Sea. How did we get to these numbers?
Weakness. We're fighting the Houthis. We beat the Germans and the Japanese. We should be able to beat the Houthis. Secretary Austin and the Biden administration's failing our troops in the field. I admire him. He's a patriot, but he's not doing a good job protecting the soldiers. I asked him a couple of months ago, Joey, what you were talking about. Is there a red line? Would you tell our enemies publicly that if you kill an American, we're coming after you? Without Iran, there are no Houthis. The Houthis are completely backed by Iran. I've been saying for 6 months now, hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map. If you really want to protect American soldiers, make it real to the Ayatollah.
These are your uni-party politicians, folks. They aren't red or blue, they are green. All they care about is money and staying in power amongst anything else, which brings us to our next story. Nikki Haley, someone who's of the same ilk as Lindsey Graham, is gaining in the polls, now solidly in second place according to a new Rasmussen poll conducted on December 17th, closing the gap between her and Trump to only 15 points. Currently, it's 44 Trump to 29 Haley in this New Hampshire poll. It's incredibly important that voters realize this, though. Nikki Haley is working for the lobby regime. She does what she's told, just like Lindsey Graham does what he's told, and behind the scenes, they are trying to usurp the election and get her into power. Her name's been floated to Donald Trump as a presidential VP or as a possible VP candidate. I've been told that Trump's been given this choice. Choose Haley as your VP if you want us to back off. This is like an open secret now in Washington. So far, he hasn't taken the bait, but they're doing this at the same time, by the way, that you see all these states trying to disqualify him. They're ramping up the pressure on him. There's something more happening behind the scenes right now. They could be trying to pressure him to take the bait. They want Nikki Haley. She's the Trojan horse of this election, the same, like, ideologically as Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden, by the way, thinking that the United States' role is to intervene in any regional skirmish, expand militarily abroad, and expand control here at home. She's for the Patriot Act, by the way. She wants to expand powers of the state. Hell, she even called for censorship legislation, a bill, during the Republican primary debate a few weeks ago, saying her top priority would be to eliminate anonymous speech online. Politicians like her and Lindsey Graham, they are just as bad, just as authoritarian as the people in power now. Last week, Tucker Carlson called her out publicly, trying to warn Donald Trump about taking the bait. Watch.
Would you vote for Trump if he chose Nikki as VP? And
would you guys vote for Trump?
Well, that's the question that I asked you specifically.
Well, I would not only not vote for that ticket, I would advocate against it as strongly as I could.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's just poison. I mean, here's someone who's actively opposed to the interests of the country I grew up in, who endorsed the BLM riots, and who is not only is not left, but is neoliberal in the darkest, most, speaking of nihilistic way, and has no real popular support. Is a creature of the oligarchs. So yeah, that would be reason to oppose the ticket.
Even Trump, Haley is a no-go.
Nikki Haley,
he would get assassinated immediately if that were the case.
Yeah, and by the way, I just can't imagine a world where that could happen. That would be so crazy. I mean, anything could happen, of course, but picking Nikki Haley, who's utterly treacherous and utterly dismissive of, like, the interests of Americans. Yeah.
It's a no-go for me, but it's a yes for BlackRock.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Press the like button, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.